We're back now with part 3 of this week's reading, and we were reading the introduction to Exodus and Exodus 1 through 4, and we're going to complete that by reading chapter 4, Objections and Excuses. Now, these are from Moses. The objections and excuses he's actually giving to God. Then Moses said, "But look, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. They will say, 'Adonai has not appeared to you.'" So Adonai said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he said. Then he said, "Cast it on the ground." When he cast it to the ground, it became a serpent. So Moses fled from before it. Then Adonai said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand and take it by the tail." So he put out his hand and laid hold of it, and it became a staff in his hand. "This is so that they may believe Adonai, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you." Adonai also said to him, "Now put your hand within your cloak." So he put his hand inside, and when he took it out, his hand had ze'arat, white as snow. So that's like the leprosy that was white as snow. That's it, and ze'arat is spelled T-Z-A apostrophe A-R-A-T. Then he said, "Put your hand back into your cloak." So he put his hand back in, and when he took it out, it was restored again as the rest of his skin. Then he said, "If they do not believe you, or listen to the voice of the first sign, they will believe the message of the latter sign. But if they do not believe even these 2 signs, nor listen to your voice, you are to take the water of the river and pour it on dry land. The water which you take out of the river will become blood on the ground." But Moses said to Adonai, "Adonai, I am not a man of words, not yesterday, nor the day before, nor since you have spoken to your servant, because I have a slow mouth and a heavy tongue." So Adonai said to him, "Who made man's mouth? Or who makes a man mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, Adonai? Now go, I will be with your mouth and teach you what to say." But he said, "Please, please, send it by another hand." Then the anger of Adonai was kindled against Moses. So he said, "In fact, Aaron the Levite is your brother. I know that he can speak well. Moreover, he is on his way to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with your mouth and with his and teach you what to do. He will be your spokesman to the people, so that he may act as a mouthpiece for you, and it will be as if you were as God for him. Now then, you must take this staff in your hand to do the signs." Moses returns to Egypt. So Moses returned to his father-in-law Jethro, and said to him, "Please let me go, so I may return to my kinsmen who are in Egypt and see whether they are still alive." Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." Then Adonai said to Moses and Midian, "Go return to Egypt, for all the men that sought your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on a donkey and returned to the land of Egypt. Moses took the staff of God in his hand. Adonai said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do all the wonders before Pharaoh that I have put in your hand. Still, I will harden his heart, and he will not let the people go. You are to say to Pharaoh, 'This is what Adonai says: Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I've said to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But you have refused to let him go. Behold, I will slay your son, your firstborn.'" It happened along the way, at a lodging place, that Adonai met him and sought to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint, cut off the foreskin of her son, and threw it at his feet, saying, "You are surely a bridegroom of blood to me." She said, "A bridegroom of blood, but because of the circumcision." Then he let him alone. Now Adonai said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Then Moses told Aaron all the words of Adonai with which he had been sent, along with the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of Bnei Israel. Aaron spoke all the words that Adonai had spoken to Moses and did the signs in the sight of the people. So the people believed. When they heard that Adonai had remembered Bnei Israel and had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped. And this is the end of chapter 4. So I'm just going to recap here and summarize a little bit here what we just had read. Exodus was written around 1450 to 1400 BC by Moses during the 40 years in the wilderness. So Moses is the author of this. He was also the author of Genesis. The central message is deliverance, or the going or the outgoing, and that is exactly what Exodus means. The outgoing of the Israelites from slavery into Egypt. The book of Exodus is also the birth of Israel as a nation. And we know Moses is the central figure. So we begin with chapter 1, beginning with the names of the children of Israel that came into Egypt. And we know there was a total of 70 souls because Joseph was already in Egypt. And we know Joseph had already died, and there was a new king that arose in Egypt that did not know Joseph, did not know that special bond and relationship, and he was bitter and did not like the fact that they were more than what the Egyptians were by numbers. So he actually wanted the male children to be murdered. So this is how Satan affected the king of Egypt. The children of Israel multiplied and continued to grow. So the king told the midwives that if there was a son born, that they were to kill the infant son. So the midwives feared God and did not do as the king commanded. And the king called for the midwives and asked them why they saved the men children. And they told Pharaoh that the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women, for they're lively, and they delivered before the midwives came into them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied, and they became very mighty. And then the Pharaoh charged all of the people, saying that every son that is born um, from the children of Israel needs to be cast into the river, and every daughter shall live. So that's how that was in chapter 1. So you can see how Satan was affecting the king of Egypt to try to kill the male children. So then we move on to chapter 2, and Moses is born, and his mother saw that he was a goodly child, and she was able to keep him hidden for 3 months. But there came a time when she could no longer hide him. So she made an ark of bulrushes and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and she put the child inside it and laid flags by the river's brink, and she let the little ark go. And his sisters stood afar off and watched. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to the river and saw the little ark, opened it, saw the child, and she had compassion for him and decided that she knew he was a Hebrew child, but she was going to raise him for her own. But the child's sister asked Pharaoh's daughter if she should find a nurse of the Hebrew women to nurse the child, and Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and she actually brought the child's mother, Moses' mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, to take the child away and nurse it for her, and she will actually pay her for doing that. So she was being paid for actually for taking care of her own child. And as the child grew and was weaned and eating regular food, she knew she had to bring him back to Pharaoh's daughter, and that's when he became her son. Now Pharaoh's daughter named him Moses, meaning because she drew him out of the water. The second part of chapter 2, Moses is raised in the Egyptian palace as a prince, actually, of Egypt, and he learns that he is a Hebrew, and he goes out to see his brethren and saw an Egyptian mistreating one of his own, and he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. But then, when he went out the second day, 2 Hebrew men confronted him about this, and Moses got fearful and realized that this was not going to fare well for him. So he fled and went into the land of Midian, and there he met the daughters of the priest of Midian, and they were being harassed by shepherds. So he drove them off, and then he helped them. And what ended up was he stayed with them, and the father Ruel who was later called Jethro, gave Zipporah his daughter to be his wife, and they ended up having two sons, actually. Chapter 3, we talk about the burning bush, and Moses was content to live there in, with his father-in-law and their family, um, and he actually heard God call to him. Sorry, I have a little pause there. Something stopped working here, and I was trying to fix it. Got a little distracted. So anyway, Moses had an encounter with a burning bush. He had kept taking care of Jethro's, his father-in-law's flock, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain, a mountain of God, which is known as Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared onto him in a flame of fire. So, he called to him, and in a flame of fire, he saw this come out of the midst of a bush, and the bush burned with fire, but it wasn't consumed by the fire. And Moses was afraid. And of course, then, God basically called to him and basically said, I've heard the cry of my people, their pain coming up to me, and I'm going to use you to deliver them. So that's the long and short of that. And Moses started right off with, well, they're not going to believe me, and who should I, who should I tell them that you are? And he said, I am that I am. And he continued to, actually, God actually gave him signs that he could prove that he had talked to him, and he turned his staff, his rod, into a serpent, and then turned it back again into the staff. Um, he put his hand in his cloak, and it became and when he pulled it out, it was full of leprosy. It was white as snow, and when he put it back in, it restored to like the rest of his skin. But Moses continued to say, they're not going to believe me. Um, they're not going to believe me because I'm slow of mouth. And God said to Moses, you know, who created you? I'm in charge of your mouth. In other words, I will be your mouthpiece. It's kind of like when the Holy Spirit speaks for us, we give it over to the Holy Spirit, and He takes over, and it comes out the way it should be coming out. So Moses didn't need to worry. God was going to give him the words to speak. But he still went on, and God got angry with him and said, "Okay, Aaron's going to be your mouthpiece. I'm going to speak to you. You're going to tell to Aaron, and Aaron's going to speak to the people, basically." And that's how that came about. And Zipporah circumcised her son and called her husband a bloody husband because of the circumcision, even though that was the covenant that was made. Um, and she actually went back. She did not go with him into Egypt at this point in time. So we're going to learn about that a little bit later. So you can see how this story is unfolding. What drama? It's kind of exciting to see how, from person to person we've got this story that is developing, and now we're going to be dealing with seeing the miracles and wonders God's going to show. And He continues to show miracles and wonders today. People may want to say that, oh, that was in biblical times, but no, that's not true. We could probably all cite miracles that we've seen ourselves. But that is the end of. We're actually going to get into that next week, and as we go into chapters 5 to 15, I gave you a little bit of a spoiler alert, because yes, we're going to be seeing miracles and wonders and signs that God is going to show, and to show His people who He is, to show Pharaoh who He is, to show even Moses the wonders of who He is. Um, so that's a little spoiler alert. We're going to be doing chapters 5 to 15 of Exodus next week. And I'm going to pause this and come back with an altar call for part 4.